Thank you, Council President. I just want to make brief remarks on my resolution I introduced. Council President, I want to thank you and my colleagues for supporting and co-sponsoring the resolution I sponsored today, calling on both the U.S. House and Senate to approve the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The U.S. House approved the bill last year, but was never approved by the U.S. Senate. The drafting of the federal legislation was preceded by a series of protests against the deaths of numerous African Americans at the hands of police officers, including the 2020 deaths of George Floyd in Minneapolis and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. The passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would address a wide range of policies and issues regarding policing practices and law enforcement accountability, including combating excessive force and racial bias in policing. The bill increases accountability for law enforcement misconduct, restricts the use of certain policing practices, enhances transparency and data collection, and establishes best practices and training requirements. It would limit qualified immunity as a defense to liability in a private civil action against a law enforcement officer, and would establish a framework to prevent any remedy racial profiling by law enforcement at the federal, state, and local levels. It also limits the unnecessary use of force and restricts the use of no-knock warrants and chokeholds. As Vice Chairman of the City Council's Public Safety Committee, I support the hard work of our Philadelphia Police Department. I understand it's necessary to have police officers, but I will never support any law enforcement officer that abuses their power. According to the nonprofit organization Mapping Police Violence, at least 1,176 people were killed by law enforcement officers in the United States in 2022, the most of any year since at least 2013. That is an average of more than 3 people a day or nearly 100 people every month last year, according to Mapping Police Violence. These are reported deaths at the hands of law enforcement, including people fatally shot, beaten, restrained, and tasered. One of the latest incidents happened 3 weeks ago when 29-year-old Tyree Nichols was brutally beaten by Memphis Tennessee police officers. The graphic video of the beating shows the officers punching, kicking, and beating Nichols even after he lay helpless, laying on the ground. I want to praise the Memphis Police Chief, Sharon C.J. Davis, for her decisive action so far in this case. The 5 police officers have been fired and charged with murder. Their specialized unit has been disbanded. 2 more officers have been suspended. 2 Memphis Fire Department emergency medical workers and a lieutenant was also fired, and more discipline is expected to happen in the future. At Mr. Nichols' funeral, he was remembered by family and friends. It was a celebration of his life, but there were also calls for police reform, not just in Memphis, but throughout the nation. Our Vice President, Kamala Harris, attended the funeral and delivered an impassioned speech calling on Congress to approve the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Even Tyree Nichols' mother, Ms. Rowan Von Wells, called for reform as she fought back tears and spoke lovingly of her son. She said, and I quote, "We need to take some action because there should be no other child that should suffer the way my son and all the other parents have lost their children. We need to get that bill passed, because if we don't, that blood, the next child that dies, that blood is going to be on their hands. The only thing that keeps me going is that I truly believe that my son was sent here on an assignment from God. And I guess now his assignment is done. He's going home," end quote. Tyree Nichols joins a long list of black men and women that have been killed by law enforcement nationwide. There are the names you know: George Floyd in Minneapolis, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, and others. Philadelphia and the greater Delaware Valley region is not free from people losing their lives due to actions by law enforcement. In June of 2017, we saw that 30-year-old David Jones was shot 3 times in the back by then-officer Ryan Pownell as Jones was fleeing during a traffic routine stop. Since the death of George Floyd, Philadelphia has lost Walter Wallace Jr., Terrell Mitchell, Stanley Cochran, and James Alexander at the hands of law enforcement officials. Let's say their names and never forget their names. Again, as Vice Chairman of the City Council's Public Safety Committee, I support the hard work of the Philadelphia Police Department every day. I understand it is necessary to have police officers, protecting, and serving, but I would never support any law enforcement entity that abuses their power. Thank you very much, Council President, for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Councilman. That will be on next week's calendar.